Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, I want to play for you an interview I did on the Now That We're a Family podcast. Elijah and Katie were great hosts. And of course, let me share my passion about real bread with all of their listeners. It was such an honor to be their guest, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
Howdy, folks. Welcome back to the podcast. Katie and I just concluded a very enjoyable interview with Sue Becker. And I don't know, Katie knows far more about Sue than I do because you've been a fan for longer than I have, even though I'm a big fan now. So,
yeah. Sue's one of my heroes as of 2 months ago. And basically all my friends and me, sit around and talk about grain milling and our different experiences and how it's working out and the different flours we're using. And I feel like Sue's information on the subject has just spread like wildflower. I had a lot of questions.
Wildflower.
Is that what I just said?
That's great. I was like, you are so clever.
So clever, I don't even notice. Anyways, but I feel like it's just going from, there's nothing faster than a game of telephone played by moms. And so just addressing basic issues when it comes to our breads. Like, okay, what if I'm gluten intolerant? Is bread going to make me fat? Talking about carbs, finding energy from that. What is the best meal to start with? She's just a wealth of information. So I think you guys are going to love this episode if any of those things pique your interest. And she has a lot more resources for you guys as well. So hopefully this is just a jumping off point if you aren't familiar with Sue and you're able to go with me down the rabbit hole of making bread for our families. Yeah, also touching on sourdough versus yeast bread and all that stuff.
Yeah, just so much. I mean, she is a wealth of knowledge. If you do enjoy our podcast, we would love it if you're able to leave a rating or a review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts at. And if you watch our podcast on YouTube, it also helps if you hit the subscribe button or like the video, leave a comment. I know that takes time, but we are always so grateful when you do that. It just means a lot to us. Well, Sue Becker, I tell you what, it's a privilege and an honor to be speaking with you today. Thank you for taking time to be with us. Katie and I have been looking forward to this conversation for some time. And I was wondering if before we get into some questions that we have for you, could you give us a quick, I say quick, make it as long as short or as long as you'd like to, a quick, maybe kind of brief origin story. How did you get to be, the bread queen or whatever title you would like to claim? How did you get to how did it come to this?
Oh, man. Okay. It's a little bit of a story. So I graduated many years ago from the University of Georgia with a degree in food science. God kind of led me there. And I went to Georgia as a pre-med student because I love studying the human body. I loved everything about biochemistry and figuring out how things work. And my basic philosophy in life as far as health and wellness goes was, if something's not working in my body, I'm not giving it the nutrient it needs. So that was kind of my jumping off place. Well, then when I like I said, I went as a pre-med student, got a little disillusioned and went, I don't want to be in college that long. I don't want that grueling a career. So I changed. I was 1 quarter in pharmacy school and went, I don't want to do that either. And that's how I got led to food science. Now, food science is not a nutrition degree. It's the study, which is kind of ironic, the study of food processing, everything that has to be done so that the food in some cases can safely sit on the shelf. I studied a lot about, food poisoning, and I took fermentation classes. I focused most of my major and my studies on microbiology. So I graduated in food science with a microbiology degree. So I worked, after graduation, I worked for Kraft Foods as a bacteriologist for almost 5 years until I had my first child. I knew from very young that I ultimately wanted to be a wife and a mother. And I'm not saying you can't work. Obviously, I have a business and a career, but I knew that was my goal. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. So when I had my first child, I came home from work. But even after graduation, I continued to study healthy eating, healthy living, the way the body worked, nutrients. And most of my studies at that kind of were more supplementation. What vitamin do I need to take, to make my body work right? But that was kind of my jumping off place. So when I had my first child, I became a stay-at-home mom. I grew up Southern. I grew up cooking, and we ate real food because I knew that was healthier. And we had a garden, and, we grew our own corn and tomatoes and peas and beans. So I was feeding my family healthy food with the exception of our bread. Now, I had read and studied all those years that whole wheat flour was better. So I was buying the whole wheat flour from the store. If you've never bought it, I tell everyone, don't waste your money. It's terrible. It's nasty. And we'll maybe get to that in a minute of why it's nasty. But so I was buying that and trying to make bread for my family from that. And I kind of gave up because it wasn't really good. I had to mix it with white flour. So I just kind of bought the healthiest whole wheat bread from the store that I could find. And so that's the way we lived. But in 1991, I was introduced to a healthy eating concept that obviously radically changed my whole life, not just the health of our family, but our whole calling and trajectory of, what God has called us to do. So it was through a publication that I subscribed to. The journal was entitled How to Greatly Reduce the Risk of Common Diseases. In the journal, the history and the processing of white flour was presented. I laugh and tell everybody, I must have missed the bread class in food science because it just didn't click until that day. And when I saw all the things that is done to our flour, the separating of the bran and germ to produce long-lasting white flour, and then the bleaching and all those things, which we may touch on that in a minute. So it made absolute perfect sense to me. And then there was a brief discussion on the common diseases that plague Americans and how it was directly related to our consumption of this white flour, processed bread products. And it just clicked. I knew it was a Christian publication, so I knew it was biblically correct and scientifically correct. So I was sold. You didn't have to do much to convince me. I had a little bit of the diseases, some of the diseases that were mentioned, and I was like, this is interesting. So I was sold. My husband actually got me a grain mill for my birthday, and that mill came into our home, and I had found some wheat that I could mill, and I made bread, and it was delicious. And no white flour, no white sugar. It was absolutely delicious. By that point, I had 5 children, and they loved it. So this was healthy food my whole family loved. I didn't have to coerce them to drink or eat the things that I would do to be healthy. And so I fell in love with it. And I tell everybody that mill came in, I milled flour, I made bread, I ate bread, and I pooped the next morning. And that was like, what happened? Because constipation was a thing that I was struggling with, and had tried natural things, and they worked if I did them. But if I didn't, and they were outside of the, your normal eating, if I didn't do them, they didn't work. But now all I had to do is eat my bread. So, and I laugh and tell everybody, I know you wanted to know this, but I haven't been constipated since 1991. I had struggled with it all my life. So then I began to notice my chronic sinus congestion. I lived on antihistamines and decongestants. All that went away because now my body's cleansing. I don't have the mucus forming and all of that and the sinus congestion. So haven't had an antihistamine or a decongestant since 1991. Those two right there are huge because most Americans are struggling with these things. I noticed my energy levels greatly increased. And when you have 5 young children that you're homeschooling and nursing babies and all the things, dogs and cats and, baseball and music lessons and all the things, you notice when your energy has greatly increased. I had stamina. I just felt good. Whereas before it was like, and my headaches went away. I used to have, maybe from all the sinus congestion, I just always seemed to have a headache. Maybe nothing that I had to medicate, but it was just like, I kind of have a headache. You just don't feel good. I felt good. And my sugar cravings went away. We weren't junky eaters, but there were certain things, my little indulgences that I had, all that went away. I didn't want it anymore because now the bread was giving me the carbohydrates and the energy I needed. I wasn't having lows and highs and crashes in the afternoon. It was just very sustaining. And then, with a family of that many children, I began to notice that my kids didn't get sick very much at all. We didn't necessarily, if somebody was sick at church, we didn't necessarily bring it home. Or if one of my children got sick, it didn't mean that all of us got sick. And then their snotty noses cleared up. I learned that toddlers don't have to have snotty noses. That's what I learned from all of this. So I have 2 children that were conceived and born after we started bread. So this was exciting to me. One of my children's warts went away. I have a whole series of wart stories, and I have to tell people, in the 25 years of raising our children on bread, our kids only needed to go to the doctor twice for an illness. That's in 25 years. Most families are going that much in a week. It's sad. So this was very exciting to me. And this was all like in a month, or 2. And, so I got very excited. I began to share my bread with other people, tell other people about it. The next thing you know, if you share your bread with anybody, they're probably going to say, "Will you make me bread?" And so I started making bread for people, and they started calling me and saying, "It's the bread. It's got to be the bread. My cholesterol dropped 85 points in a month. My irritable bowel is cleared up. My child's warts went away." They started telling me testimonies that they were seeing just from the bread I was baking for them. And so I pulled out my biochemistry books and I started going, what would be in this bread that could bring someone's cholesterol down, and even my own stories. And I found it's all there. Grains are one of the most nutrient dense foods that God has given us. So it got me real excited. I eventually started making so much bread that was consuming my day. And here I was trying to make bread for our family and all these people. Because when someone's cholesterol drops 85 to 100 points in a month, they tell all their friends. So the next thing I know, I had all these people. And to be honest, I had just had my 6th child, and I got really tired. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't make bread for everybody. And my husband and I had been praying about possibly starting a business. And one day, making bread for everybody, it just hit me. And I believe with everything in me that God put these words in my heart and in my mind. My husband drove in the driveway from work. I met him in the driveway. And I said, I do not think I am supposed to make bread for the world. I think I'm supposed to teach the world to make bread for themselves. So our company, the Bread Beckers, our last name is Becker, of course, and was born that day on the driveway in 1992. And the rest is kind of history. We had 6 young children. We were in a 1,300 square foot house, which we still live in today. And but we were there with a customer base of 4. That was my world, which is kind of funny now. And so we started, and we had, by 1998, we had outgrown our home and what our children and us could handle on a day-to-day basis. My husband came home from work and did this full time. We never dreamed of this. And we incorporated in 1999 with a longtime friend and partner. We moved into our current location, which is 10,000 square feet here. You see the studio kitchen behind me. We have a classroom out front that you can't see, that we can seat 100 people. And we have regularly, like Saturday's class is coming up. I'll have 75 people in that class. We have that regularly. And then a few years back, we acquired another warehouse where we bring in truckloads of grain and package it down in our 6-gallon food grade buckets so that it's storable. And that's another, I think, 13,000 square feet. So it's from a customer base of 4 to 1,300 square feet. My husband used to dream of a forklift and a loading dock, and we now have it. And that's kind of where we are. We have a YouTube channel with classes, and I have my own podcast now, Sue's Healthy Minutes. And yeah, it's kind of amazing. And, I'll close out this part with just saying this. Just this morning in my Bible reading, I'm going to tear up a little bit. I don't know why, but I was just reading about Abraham. And when God called Abraham and he said, you will be blessed, and through you, the whole world will be blessed. And, I started a ministry in 2016, and we now I've gone to Haiti. We built a bakery there. We built a bakery in Tanzania. We've helped establish a bakery in Israel. We've sent grain mills and education to Japan and the Philippines and the Bahamas. And I just laid there and I teared up and I was like, God, my world 33 years ago in 1992 was 4. And today, I don't know. I just had a wonderful prayer meeting with an international group that I pray with on Monday. And a lady in Sweden just said, "You're my hero, Sue. I've been listening to your podcast and I'm now making bread after 20 years of thinking I couldn't eat bread." And so anyway, that's who I am. And that's, it's totally God's hand in the whole journey and calling. And like I said, when I said those words to Brad 33 years ago, I never dreamed that I literally would be teaching the world, not just my world of 4, how to make bread. So here we are.
Well, I think it's pretty incredible that you survived the whole gluten intolerance agenda. You've been going so steady this whole time. And in the middle of that, we've had this huge swell of gluten-free everything, right? Yeah. So can you speak a little bit to that? Because I feel like we're still in the thick of it. I feel like people are starting to be like, okay, maybe what I've been told about gluten isn't true, but can you speak a little bit to gluten? And something that you spoke about on another podcast that I really like was just the concept of Jesus being the bread of life and his comparison to that when we throw out, bread and carbs and kind of view it as kind of a dirty food.
Yeah. Yes. Well, we struggled through the gluten-free, the very thick of it. And it's really, really sad. It's just very deceptive and misleading information. And we struggled through it. But I think it's important that people know what gluten is. They don't understand that. And I'm going to go back for a second to Genesis chapter 1, verse 29. God says, I've given you 2 kinds of food. I've given you plants that bear fruit with the seed in it. That's all of our fruits and vegetables, delicious food, very nutritious, right? And I've given you plants that bear seed for your food. And those plants that bear seed, that's your grains, your beans, your nuts, your seeds, And so God gave us those. Something's miss when we tried to eliminate a whole food group. And that was one of the things that opened my eyes in that first information was grains and beans are the most nutrient dense food group that God has given us. There's really only 4 nutrients missing or slightly deficient in wheat that are absolutely essential for health and to promote life in your body. And that's vitamin A, vitamin C, and vitamin A is actually in some grains and wheat, but a little bit low. It's not a great source. So vitamin A, vitamin C, where do we get those? All those fruits and vegetables God gave us, And then vitamin D, he gave us the sunshine to get out there and get those nutrients. And then B12 is not in any plant food, but that's how nutritious grains are. And so when this whole gluten-free thing came around, I was like, there's something wrong with this, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And then the more I studied, the more I learned. There are 2 unique proteins that are found in the wheat family of grains. No other family of grains have these 2 unique proteins. And those 2 unique proteins, when you hydrate the flour from the wheat, that those 2 proteins form a stretchy substance called gluten. So gluten is not technically in grains. It is something that's formed in grains, and it's the proteins. So it's those 2 proteins, gliadin and glutenine. And that's all it is. And when people understand that, it makes a little more sense. But here's the issue. So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they knew that whole grain flour spoiled because the kernel of grain the bran is the outer surface. The interior part is the germ. And the bran is where vitamins, minerals, fiber, proteins, enzymes, all kinds of great nutrients. The germ is the interior part. That's where your oils, your fats, your oils, your vitamin E, your fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, proteins as well. The rest of the seed is known as the endosperm, and that's the protein part. Okay, so that's where those 2 unique proteins would be located in that endosperm, white flour, if you will. They knew that flour spoiled because the oils, once you expose the the oils to the air, oxidation takes place. So somebody came up with this brilliant idea. Let's take the germ away. Let's take the bran away and just leave the white flour, the starch and protein. Flour won't spoil. So in comes white bread, 1900s. Diseases became rampant. I won't go into those right this minute because I'll divert and get off the gluten subject. So what is gluten? It's two proteins that form this stretchy substance. And that's not all the proteins that are in flour, but it's in the endosperm part, the white flour part. So what are people consuming now, today? They're consuming protein and starch without the vitamins, the minerals, the fiber, all the things that God put in that kernel of grain for us to nourish our bodies. He never intended us to eat it without the bran and the germ. A scripture that just came to mind when Jesus said to Peter, Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith will not fail you. I find it interesting. Sifting is not threshing. It's taking that flour, running it through a screen. So you take out the bran and germ and you leave just the white flour. And my husband puts it very, very, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, gives you a great picture of it. He goes, so what Satan wanted to do is sift Peter to just leave him as a worthless lump of white flour, a worthless lump of white bread, instead of take out all the nutritious part and just leave you with nothingness. And that's what white bread is. It's proteins that our body needs, but we can't utilize them and cleanse our system without the vitamins, minerals, and particularly the fiber. So the problem today is, number one, did you know that's what gluten was? It's not some evil demon that some scientist put in there. No, God put them in there. They've been in there since the beginning of time. And that is why wheat is the king of bread making and has been since the beginning of time, because it's important that those two proteins form this stretchy substance called gluten when you make yeast or sourdough leavened bread. Those organisms, when they feed on the dough, they produce carbon dioxide gas, and it's those stretchy strands of protein that trap the gas, and that's what enables the bread to rise. So you see, without them, you would be eating flatbread all the time, unleavened bread all the time. And so that's all it is, and that's what it does. But like I said, the problem is people aren't differentiating between wheat and the bread in the store, or gluten and the bread in the store. They're calling that gluten, or they're calling that stuff in the store, wheat, and it may be made from wheat. The best analogy I can give is I showed somebody one time, I said, here's this piece of paper. It was made, what is paper made from? It's made from wood that's made from a tree, that comes from a tree, right? But you would never look at this piece of paper and go, oh, that's a tree. Yeah, that bread in the store is not wheat. It was made from wheat, but it's very denatured. And then, of course, when they took the bran and germ out and left just the endosperm, it makes fluffy bread because it's just that gluten proteins are there without the add-in or the bran and the germ kind of, bringing things down. It makes fluffy bread, and people loved it, and it took over the market. And we have literally been getting sick ever since the 1900s. I mean, when the steel rolling mills came on the scene that started producing massive volumes of long-lasting white flour, they thought, oh, this is a wonderful discovery. But the scriptures tell us there's a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is death. And that's exactly what happened. The steel rolling mills took over the flour milling process. The stone mills and local millers went out of business. No longer were people milling their grain in their homes. And they thought, oh, this is wonderful. But 3 diseases became epidemic: beriberi, which is a vitamin B1 deficiency, pellagra, a B3 deficiency, and anemia. And eventually health officials traced it to those missing B vitamins that were no longer in our bread and in our flour. So they urged millers to put the bran and germ back in. The millers like, nope, that's not going to happen. We're selling that to the cattle feed industry, and we're not going to give up that money-making endeavor. So health officials said eventually, but it took until 1948, eventually they said, okay, you got to fix the flour. And that's when enriching came to be. And so they started enriching the flour. And this was where my eyes were really opened as a food scientist. When I read the word enriched on a bag of flour or bread or something, I thought, we are doing everyone a favor, by making this better than it would have been had we not messed with it. And that is not the case at all. I learned in that publication that enrichment to the bread industry is replacing a mere fraction of the nutrients that are lost when they take the bran and germ away, because that's where the vitamins, minerals are. And of course, no vitamin E is ever put back, no fiber is ever put back. So it has caused great digestive issues. I mean, pellagra alone is digestive issues, dementia, mental insanity, dermatitis, and supposedly the enrichment fixed that. But how many skin issues do we have? How many digestive issues do we have? Dementia, and beriberi is a nervous disorder, all these nervous disorder diseases. So it didn't fix them when they put the 3B vitamins and iron back in there for the 25 to 30, 35 to 40, whatever it is, nutrients that are lost when they take the bran and germ away. So that's where we're at. We've been now eating protein and starch, gluten and starch, if you want to say that. And that's not the way God designed it. So yeah, it's caused a lot of issues. And the truth of the matter is most people, I think I read a study, it said about 60% of people are self-diagnosed that they need to be gluten-free or that they're gluten sensitive because they quit eating the bread in the store and they feel better. Well, yeah, you're going to feel better because you're not, causing the digestive issues and all the problems with that. So our journey has been one of just education and explaining to people, the real root cause of it. And, celiac disease, true genetic celiac disease only affects, affects less than 1% of Americans are true celiac. That need to be gluten-free. That's not what you're probably hearing today. So many people, but I want to read you a quote. I thought this was very interesting. I usually read it, and I came across it years ago. And so it's from a doctor that I respect, but I want you to listen to his conclusion. So I agree with this. Damage to the gastrointestinal tract from the overuse of antibiotics, anti-inflammatory drugs like Advil or Aleve, and acid-blocking drugs like Prilosec and Nexium, two very commonly prescribed medications for acid reflux, combined with our low-fiber, high-sugar diet, leads to the development of celiac disease and gluten intolerance or sensitivity and the resultant inflammation. I agree with all of that. Did you hear what he says? Causes it, leads to it. Overuse of antibiotics. My children, twice antibiotics in 25 years. Yeah, that's real different. Me, I don't remember the last time I had an antibiotic. Anti-inflammatory drugs like Advil and Aleve. I don't think people realize how much damage to the gastrointestinal tract it causes. One dose will cause some bleeding. If we have to take it for a headache, that's different once in a while, but people that are living on them for anti-inflammatory. Acid blocking drugs. Oh my goodness. Prilosec, Nexium, I don't know if they're number one right now, but it's very high up there, very commonly prescribed drug. And then low fiber, high sugar, the bread in the store. What? They've stripped all the bran and germ, all the fiber out. Then they sweeten it, add sugar, and then the muffins and the cupcakes and the donuts and all of those things. That's what leads to celiac disease. Here's the problem. That is why, he goes on to say, the elimination of gluten can be a powerful way to prevent and reverse these chronic diseases. Then he goes on to say, the biggest problem is wheat, the major source of gluten in our diet. Hold on a minute. I didn't hear wheat in the lineup of what caused the sensitivity. Yeah, eating that now may be causing you distress, but the cure for it, I'm about to speak at a conference called Need Your Cure. And that's the cure for it is let's go back and eat the healing whole grains and wheat included, that can heal your gut and heal your digestive tract. And maybe you won't need antibiotics and anti-inflammatories and Prilosec and Nexium. So it's been a journey to educate, but I'm going to tell you, I think it's one of the biggest blessings. I don't know. It's just been a huge blessing to see people that with tears in their eyes say, "Can I hug you?" I've been gluten-free for all these years. And here's another issue with the very restrictive diets. What I have found, especially when you restrict a whole food group like whole grains and even wheat, the next thing you know, you're allergic to this. The next thing you know, you're allergic to this. The next thing you know, you're allergic to this, or you have reactions, adverse reactions. And I have met 2 or 3 people in the last year with tears in their eyes saying, I was down to 7 foods was all I could eat. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was down to 8 foods was all I could eat, and hug me. And here's their words, and I love it. I've captured this saying. They said, I am so blessed to find food freedom for the first time in years. And they're finding that it's not the gluten, it is the processed flour, and that real whole grain wheat, eaten the way God created it, with all the fiber, all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the nutrients, they're just fine. Now, a true celiac, of course, can't, but like I said, that is less than 1% of Americans have true celiac. So it's been a real blessing. So when people learn what gluten really is, and that, hey, if you eat it in the with all the nutrients that God intended, and you have the fiber to help your digestion, move your bowels, and get things out the way God created them, that they don't have a problem at all. So, yeah, and it's been one of the biggest blessings of my 33 years to see people. I mean, 2 or 3 customers today hugged my neck here in the store and was like, I just, I've been gluten-free all these years. I have this international prayer group that I pray with, and lady from Sweden, I'm going to get her on my podcast because she was like, I've been 20 years gluten-free and I'm Swedish and we love bread. And she went on and on. My grandchildren, poop now, and my husband has energy. My son has energy. And I and my sisters, we thought we had to be gluten-free, and now we can eat this bread. And she goes, I dream about bread. I make bread all the time, and I have energy, and it just goes on and on and on. The list of, when people find health and what they're finding. One of the girls gave me this testimony. She couldn't eat dairy. She couldn't do gluten. So she had been gluten-free for 15 years, I think. She goes, the next thing I know, I can't do dairy and I can't do my own farm fresh eggs. And she tried the bread. She had no adverse reaction. She goes, now I can drink my milk and now I can eat my eggs. So it's finding that it's reversing, these symptoms, I guess, or if you want to call it that. So I'm finding that people aren't just tolerating the bread or the gluten that's in the bread, if you want to call it that. They are finding health and restoration and reversal of a domino effect of just poor health. And the lady that hugged me today, she goes, I'm sick of being sick. I've been so tired and blah, blah. And she goes, and I'm finding energy and just feeling good. So it's been exciting.
Yeah, that's great. I'm really glad you just went so into depth on that whole gluten issue. When I hear you reference Genesis and kind of that original diet that God gave us and all these ingredients that he blessed us with, that adds up to me, with the exception, like you said, of, B12, which is fine by me because I enjoy a steak from time to time.
Listen, I do too. Yeah.
And so something that I've heard too is that, a lot of the oils that we get from grains have those lipids and sterols that actually make our cells more permeable to receive nutrients from the other foods that we get. And that's one of the unique foods that gives us those oils so that we can actually, get the nutrients from other foods as well. But something that keeps coming up, I think, today is not just, the gluten's something, your gut health, but then the caloric issue, right? Because people they're trying to lose weight, and they are trying to, and again, obesity and people being overweight it's a whole array of things, right? It's a sedentary lifestyle. It's all the sugary drinks, right? There's a lot of things causing it. And yet one of the first things to go is it's those extra carbs that people will say. They're like, this is the issue. And there's so many diets and kind of fads now around eliminating carbs. Can you kind of speak to what some negative ramifications can be, even in regards to your weight and how your body's not able to function properly when you actually eliminate those grains from your diet as well?
Well, I think what people don't realize is, first of all, real bread is not fattening. And, the scripture I love is Jesus compared himself to bread. In John 6:35, he says, I am the real bread of life. He who comes to me shall be satisfied. They knew exactly what he was talking about. A lot of them lived on bread. I mean, what did he feed the 5,000? Barley loaves and fish. Not a real diverse diet here. But what people don't realize is the bread that's in the store that is devoid of nutrients and devoid of fiber. Two things: devoid of nutrients, that's going to leave you craving. You're going to want more. And not only is it devoid of nutrients, but it actually robs your body of nutrients, chromium and your B vitamins. It takes those to even metabolize that. And so the more you eat, the more you crave. The other thing is fiber. Fiber is very slowly metabolized, very slowly digested, I should say. So it's a longer, you're going to feel full longer, you're going to be satisfied. And that's what Jesus meant. So I haven't even eaten lunch today. I haven't even thought about it. This morning I had a Georgia fresh peach and a piece of bread and a fried egg. And that was my breakfast. And I'm full and I'm satisfied. Some days I just have a muffin, and I'm full and satisfied. So I think that's what people have to realize, is that this bread is filling, this bread is satisfying. And, we have so many stories of people losing weight because they're satisfied nutritionally, so they're not craving, and they're full and hungry. I had a lady one time when we used to have a bakery. We don't have a bakery anymore, but she came and she bought a loaf of our raisin bread. And she goes, I ate half the loaf going home, which was 5 pieces of bread, And I said, well, did you eat any dinner? And she goes, no, I was too full from the bread. And I'm like, there you go. Those 5 pieces of bread probably had less calories than what you were going to try to consume for dinner and then something after, ice cream And so anyway, that's just one small example. But another example is in the scripture, in Proverbs 23, verse 1, God gave a warning in there. And I think it's interesting for people to know that people have been sifting their flour, sifting the bran and germ away, probably since the beginning of time. They learned how to make, coarse reed sifters that could take some of the bran and germ out so that the bread would be fluffier and whiter. But it was reserved for the wealthy, for the kings, for the royalty that had bakers, or could go and buy their bread from a bakery because it was fluffier. And, but Proverbs 23, I never thought about this until I started on the bread journey. And then I knew exactly what God was talking about. It says, be careful when you sit down to the king's table. Do not crave his dainties and his delicacies. At first I thought when I read that, it's probably snakes and squid and eyeballs and things that we weren't supposed to be eating. But I think it was white flour dainties and cakes and fluffy bread, And God says in that proverb, be careful when you sit down to his table. Do not crave his dainties and delicacies. And this is the part that really got me that will answer your question. It says, put a knife to your throat, lest you be given to gluttony. Why can we overeat? Because we are eating dainties and delicacies that are devoid of fiber, devoid of nutrients that fill you up and satisfy you. And I think that's a big problem in obesity. People weren't obese before the 1900s, typically. I mean, you would have some, maybe the wealthy, but I understand they were not as sedentary. We have a very sedentary lifestyle now, but they were milling their grain and they were eating bread, and it was filling and it was satisfying. When my children, when we first started making our bread and, milling our grain and making my bread, I had 5 children. We homeschooled. They were always around the house. It would be so frustrating to me. We would eat breakfast, and before we could even get school started, the older ones especially would be in the kitchen looking for something to eat within an hour or so, always. And we ate big breakfast, but the white bread didn't fill us up. And so after bread, I tell people they would say, you must spend all your time in the kitchen. I'm like, actually, no. We now eat breakfast and no one even thinks about eating till 2 p.m. And, and then we eat lunch and no one thinks about eating. My kids didn't snack anymore. They were full and they were satisfied. So that's a thing I will tell people. Obesity is coming from not being full, not being satisfied, nutritionally deficient stuff in the store. And, we were eating pretty healthy. We were eating real fruit, real vegetables, real meat, real eggs, real butter, real milk, raw milk, but the bread was key to filling us up and satisfying. And like I said, being more slowly digested, it stayed with you longer. You've heard of oatmeal being stick to your ribs. That's one grain, but all grains are that way. So yeah, it's sad. And there's study after study. I can't quote it completely, but there was one that particularly was with women. And they found that women that ate the most whole grains were less likely to gain weight and to be obese. And it was the ones that shied away. And, most of the world, this is what people don't realize. Most of the world lives on carbohydrates. They don't eat a lot of meat. When I go to Haiti, they eat beans and rice. And mangoes and bananas and tomatoes and peppers and beans and rice and beans and rice and beans and rice. Go to Tanzania, it's beans and rice. Rarely they'll kill a chicken or a goat for us, but it's beans and rice and plantains and, so, and what also people don't understand, in one slice of our bread made from freshly ground whole grains, it has 5 grams of protein. Wow. In wheat, so people are just thinking, oh, it's all carbs. It's all carbs. Not if you eat it the way God created it, with the bran and germ, the vitamins, minerals, the fiber, all intact. So I
have a question, because I have been milling. And is there anything you do to make the bread less crumbly? Is there something, because sometimes it's crumbly, sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, do you have like a
secret?
A tried and true? Yeah. What's your secret for that?
Well, I do use egg in my bread, and that does tend to make the crumb, if you will, a little less crumbly. Mm-hmm. Also, I love lecithin. I use sunflower seed lecithin. You will notice a night and day difference in the texture of your bread. Very, very silky, smooth, because it helps to break those oils down, the oils that you're using in the recipe, and makes them go into suspension a little better. It's an emulsifier. So that's one thing. But even if you don't have that, and a lot of people go, I don't want to add an additive. It's healthy. It's not anything bad, but use milk instead of water if you don't have dairy allergies, and use butter instead of oil for your fat. And you can just use it the same. Your crumb will be like cake. It will be so smooth and so nice. And then try to use a little less flour. That's another thing. I think people think that bread dough's got to be stiff, a ball, Mine is very loose. Sometimes it's a little difficult to work with, but if you can let that dough be a little softer, a little looser, you'll get softer bread, and you'll get bread that stays soft longer. So I would say try to back off the flour a little bit. Put an egg in there if you don't have a problem with that. Lecithin if you don't have a problem with that. And I do use sunflower seed lecithin. So much of the commercial lecithin used in the food industry and out there is from soy, because it's one of the richest food sources of lecithin. But try the milk and butter thing. I don't use it too much because I have a granddaughter that does legitimately have dairy allergies. So that's why so many of my recipes, and it's a little cheaper, to use oil and water instead of milk and butter. But you'd be surprised. It really does make a difference in the texture of the bread.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I can't wait to try that. That's good. And then I'm also curious, can you speak a little bit to, I think it's phytic acid in beans, because this comes up in so many different conversations where people are saying, hey, should we soak our beans? Should we not soak our beans? What is your take on that acid?
That's another one. I tell you, in 33 years, it's just been one myth-busting project all these years. I mean, just on and on. So phytic acid, it comes from the whole misnomer about it being an anti-nutrient comes from some pretty outdated information. Back in the 1940s, a scientist wrote that, the phytic acid was a chelator, and it's found in the bran portion of grains and in beans. But what he didn't realize is that it is a powerful chelator. It's a chelator of heavy metals. And so, yes, it can bind with iron and calcium and zinc, but most of the foods that contain phytic acid, like your grains and beans, they have an abundance of calcium and iron and zinc and magnesium. So it would be minuscule amounts that it's going to chelate and make you, say, iron deficient or calcium deficient or something like that. So that's a big thing. You can, now I do soak beans. I try to soak beans before I cook them because they do have some undigestible starches that are a little harder on your system to break down. So I do recommend soaking beans before you cook them. But grains, I don't find a need for that at all. And it's really a very small amount of phytic acid that could be broken down. And also there's an enzyme phytase that breaks down phytic acid. In a healthy digestive system, you're going to produce it. You're going to produce that enzyme already. And it's interesting, when the whole phytic acid thing came out, I think it was back in the early 2000s, that one, oh man, that took the world by storm too. It's just one thing after another. I did a lot of research and I came across a book written by a biochemist. And the title of the book was, it's old, I don't even know if it's in print anymore, but it was called The Diet for the Atomic Age. Her whole book was on phytic acid, why we needed it, the more toxic and radioactive and, all of it in our environment. The more toxic our world becomes, the more beans and grains we need to eat, the more phytic acid we need to have in our diets to chelate these heavy metals and these toxins, environmental toxins from our body. So I tell people, you don't have to do it. You don't have to worry about it. It's not an anti-nutrient. It is actually a very powerful antioxidant. So it's actually a good nutrient. God does not make mistakes. He does not make mistakes. And that's what I tell people. And, people come back and but, they used to make sourdough, and the way people make sourdough now with these long rises, I don't think that's not the way they were traditionally made. So I don't think that even the sourdough is going to break down that much phytic acid. And like I said, I don't think it's necessary. So it's a vital nutrient that God put in grains and beans, our seeds again, to detoxify. So yeah.
That's actually interesting when you bring up the long rises of sourdough, because it's like when we do our long rises, they're in the fridge. Which wouldn't be very effective, like back in the day, you didn't have refrigeration. Right. Well, so that's an interesting concept.
I learned to make sourdough the first year Brad and I were married 50 years ago. So, and it is not at all the way they're making it now. And I believe it's the way it was more traditionally made. I have a cookbook from 1901 that was Brad's great grandfather's. And the way they made it was the way that I learned to make it, where you keep a little bit of starter. And the night before or morning of or whatever that you want to make bread, you take that little bit of starter out, you feed it a lot of flour and a lot of water. So you have this huge bowl of starter. Then you take that, when you're ready to make your bread, you have to let that sit overnight. You take a half a cup of starter out, put it back in the refrigerator, and then you take that huge bowl of starter and you add flour and oil and whatever, whatever you're going to make. And you make 5 loaves of bread and it rises in an hour or two and you bake it and you're done. Now, they probably didn't have refrigerators to put their starter in, but you got to remember, they're making bread every day. So going in the refrigerators for someone that if you make 5 loaves at a time, for our family, we didn't need that. We ate it over the course of a week. So that's the way it used to be made. And it's just interesting to me now.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Can you speak a little bit to bread and the effects on blood sugar? Because that's something that today I don't know. I'm really interested in it. It kind of goes along with the weight thing. It goes along with, being cranky or having this crash. And so people are really encouraging, hey, add more protein to your diet, sustain that, your glucose levels. What would you say?
Well, there was a Dr. Anderson from the University of Kentucky that did extensive research on blood sugar. And what he did was he took patients, and a lot of times he hospitalized them to do his studies. He took them off the high protein diets, high protein, low carb, and put them on high carb, low protein. However, the carbs were real whole grain bread, real whole grains, real fruits, real vegetables. And in one of the studies, I think it was 16 out of the 18 patients, they were all insulin dependent, came out of the hospital off of insulin. What he found was the key was the fiber that's in your whole grains and beans and your fresh fruits and vegetables. Those are broken down more slowly. So therefore your sugars are released into your bloodstream more slowly. So you're getting, and that's why I noticed more energy. No matter what anybody tells you, our bodies were made to use carbohydrates for energy, sugar for energy. So you get this slow release, breakdown of those good carbs because of the fiber there. And you get the slow release of sugar. So you get this sustained source of energy throughout the day. Also, because it's more slowly broken down, you don't get this spike in blood sugar because you eat a Twinkie or a donut, you're eating a piece of real whole grain bread. You don't get that spike. And then because we're fearfully and wonderfully made, when you get a spike in your blood sugar, our body knows to produce a hormone called glucagon that helps your cells uptake that sugar, and it'll bring that sugar down. Sometimes, though, it overproduces. So then your blood sugar drops way low. So that's hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. Then you're shaky and you just got to go to your next fix, whether it's a soft drink or a donut or a candy bar or whatever it is. Then you go right back into shoots up your blood sugar. Your body does what it needs to do. Your blood sugar drops. And then unfortunately, if you could wait for your body to bring your blood sugar back up, it'd be okay. But nope, you're craving that candy bar and you're shaky and you've got a headache and you feel anxious. And so hypoglycemia and diabetes, they're really the same disease, if you want to call it that, with different manifestation. Is the problem is the same. We need to get that blood sugar stabilized. Now, blood sugar these days is a little more complicated. I think there's some other issues affecting it, that it might not be as simple as that, because there's some insulin resistance and things like that. So your body could be making enough insulin, but it just can't, your cells can't uptake it. But, I've seen so many people say, even juvenile diabetes, which can't be reversed, but people write me to tell me that, their child or whatever that's on insulin has greatly reduced their demand for insulin because their blood sugar is stabilized. And so that's a big key. And protein is important, and everybody's metabolism is a little different. So you might have that one diabetic that's got to have some protein with that carbohydrate, but many people are finding that it's the fiber, the chromium, the minerals that are in your wheat and your grains, the slow digestion, the slow breakdown of sugars, and the slow release of those sugars into your bloodstream. They're finding that their blood sugars stabilize. And that's really, really, really important. And it breaks my heart when people come in our store even and say, oh, I'm diabetic, I have to stay away from bread. And I'm like, it's probably why we're diabetic, is because what's the bread in the store? Low fiber, high sugar. That's the issue. And not to mention, there's so many soft drinks, and when you have more sugar than you need in a week in one drink, that's a lot. So
yeah, I think of this from the perspective of, we have children, we want to live an active lifestyle, and we put a high price tag on time. Time is a valuable thing, and how modern day convenience food is really, it's not good for us, right? It's not, It doesn't serve us. And yet I feel like you can get so much time back through whole grain, good bread, right?
Yeah.
You actually get time back, you get energy back. And it's kind of like the original fast food that was actually intended to serve us well, something that you could have on hand. Obviously it takes time and effort to make. And with that, and maybe we could actually close with this because we're up against the time here. What would you say, or unless you have one more question?
I just have one more.
Okay. Well, before Katie's last question, what would you tell to people that maybe they kind of, they scratched the surface with some sourdough stuff. Then they started avoiding, bread at the store altogether, but they want to reintroduce it. It can seem overwhelming getting them, starting to mill your own grains and baking your own bread. What is like a baby step for people?
A baby step, a grain mill. See my grain mill back there? I mean, that's the starting point. I tell anybody, you want to change the health of your family, get a grain mill, introduce that. And especially if you're already making muffins and pancakes and sourdough, if you want to do sourdough, this is easy. And it was easy for me because I made things from scratch, so it was very easy to incorporate. But even if you're not, baby step, that mill will mill a pound of flour in 30 seconds, so it's very fast, very easy. And then start with quick breads, pancakes and muffins. If you're not, my mother was very Southern and she said to me one day, yeast bread scares me. Don't be scared if you're scared of yeast bread, then muffins, pancakes, coffee cake, just change your flour to real freshly milled whole grains with all the vitamins and all the nutrients. And you are so right. A lady today hugged me and said, I have my life back. And the energy, and when people said to me, you must spend all your time in the kitchen, I'm like, actually, no. We're not looking for food all the time. My children growing up even noticed when they would go to friends' house, they were like, they eat all the time. They snack all the time. They're constantly chips and soda and drinks and candy and da-da-da. And my kids were like, I'm just not hungry, So you get your life back and, how do you want to spend your time? Feeling sick and tired and at the doctor or whatever? Or, having the energy to do what God called you to do. I had another lady tell me today she's off all of her acid reflux medicine, her blood pressure medicine. Have you looked at the price of medicine? I haven't lately because I don't need any medicine, but this is cheaper than one prescription drug. I'm pretty sure, for all of those things. Yeah.
So that's my question actually is about the mill. So I see you have the Wonder Mill back there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so there's so many mills on the market today. I actually have a Wonder Mill. A friend gave it to me, but a lot of my friends are getting like mock mills or like, there's just different brands. Would you recommend one over the other? Is it just like pick one that fits your budget? What would you recommend?
I would say pick one that fits your budget and your lifestyle. I love the Wonder Mill. It's a stainless steel milling heads, lifetime warranty on the milling heads, as long as you mill grains and beans and nothing else. Okay. So, so this is the milling heads to the Wonder Mill. You're never going to replace them. They don't wear out. They don't absorb oils. They don't glaze over. And it's fast and it's clean. Like I said, that canister, the capacity is 12 cups of flour. I can mill that in a minute or so. By the time I get my other ingredients ready, I'm got dough for 6 loaves of bread, flour for 6 loaves of bread ready. So for me, and I like the closed container. For me, I was making 6 loaves of bread twice a week. Speed was everything. I know that the stone mills it's kind of funny that they're very trendy right now. Yeah. The original home flour mill were stone mills and the micronizing mills became very popular because they were fast and easy and clean, and now it's kind of funny that everybody wants to go back to stone mills. They're slow. They're pretty. They're wooden. They're expensive. They're slow. It's going to take 5 to 7 minutes to grind what I can grind in a couple of minutes, a minute or so. And the stones sometimes do glaze over, so there's some cleaning there. I never take my mill apart and clean the milling heads or any of the internal workings. So, the Wonder Mill, I think, is $299 right now, so it's $300. The stone mills can go anywhere from $400 to $600 and $700. Mm-hmm. And like I said, they're slow. They mill into an open bowl. But if it's one or two of you and you really like the look, go for it. But I don't think my Wonder Mill is ugly.
I think it does the job.
It does the job. So that's what I would say. It's very trendy right now. But I don't think there's any health benefit to stone versus the stainless steel milling heads. They're fast. They don't create any more heat than any other friction, And now one thing I did read is I contacted the company about the composite material that they use to make the stone milling heads. They do recommend replacing your milling heads every 5 to 6, maybe 10 years if you don't use it very much. But I'm hoping people that hear me, they're going to use their mill every day. So that's something to think about. Like I said, I've been using my Wonder Mill for 25 years. I started with a different mill. I've never opened it up, never replaced my milling heads ever. And so that is, that's something to think about. So budget, room on your counter. If you have a tiny kitchen, then maybe you do want a little smaller thing. But just remember, you're going to have to babysit those stone mills a little bit, that you put a bowl underneath to catch your flour, and you're going to have to turn it, because it'll start filling up on one side. So I just love the ease, the clean, I just love the ease of the Wonder Mill. So that would be, just some research and don't be caught up in the trendy that it's got to be a stone mill, to be healthy. Doesn't. So
that's good. Hey, well, thank you so much, Becker, for your time. This has been so insightful, and I don't know, we're really grateful for all the work that you do and that you continue to do. It's blessing many homes and just, as you said, across the world. So thank you so much, and keep up the good work. Can you say one more time, where's the best place for people to find you? You referenced your YouTube channel, a podcast. Are all those places, any other places people can find you at?
So our website, of course, is breadbeckers.com, bread, B-R-E-A-D, Beckers, like our last name, BECKERS.com. We have a brick and mortar building. So if you're ever in Georgia, in north of Atlanta, Woodstock, Georgia, come visit our store. There's people walk in and they're like, what is this? They love it here. We have Facebook and Instagram, Bread Beckers, of course, and then our YouTube channel, lots of classes on our YouTube channel. And then my podcast that I started in 2022, it's called Sue's Healthy Minutes. It's on any podcast platform, or you can go to our website and click on and listen to it too. And then, of course, my book is a wealth of information, the Essential Homegrown Flour book. And I encourage you to get it. Lots of nutritional information and just how-tos, how to make bread, and lots of recipes. And just keep it simple. Just keep it simple. Do what works for your family and your time and your budget and your needs. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated, located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.